Europe is dotted with castles. They are an important cultural heritage. But they are also shrouded in myth, and many castles are now in ruins. So how do we really know what they looked like? This video aims at discussing the methods and considerations going into reconstructing medieval castles. Normandy, 1066. William, Duke of Normandy, invades England. A few years later, an embroidery is made depicting the events. This embroidery, though called the Bayeux Tapestry, is a visual narrative of how William conquered England. But crucially, it also has depictions of wooden towers being constructed on top of mounds, known as Motte and Bailey castles. Through studies of the Bayeux embroidery and comparing it with archaeological findings, it is possible to get clues on what these imposing strongholds once looked like. This also applies in other countries like Denmark, albeit this type of castle seems to appear here a bit later. However, not all early medieval castles are made of wood. Situated in northern Zealand, Denmark, is a peculiar ring of travertine bricks. These are the ruins of the 12th century Bastrup Tower. Its huge dimensions allow for a height of up to 30 meters. However, nobody knows the actual height of the tower, but studying another similar 12th century tower in Erfurt, Germany, may hint at how to illustrate the Bastrup Tower. In this reconstruction, a hoard is placed above the staircase. Its function is to allow defenders to get closer to the intruding enemy and attack them from above. Even though no evidence exists for a hoard on the Bastrup Tower, there exists plenty of evidence elsewhere in medieval illuminations. The reason this hoard is not going all the way around the tower is for the purpose of illustrating uncertainties. The model then allows one to perceive the tower both with and without a hoard simultaneously. Having several models of the same tower, each with different architectural features, could lead to a misunderstanding, and one may get the impression that they are not reconstructions of the same tower. A very similar dilemma of choice was faced when reconstructing Hammershus Castle. This is the grand keep of Hammershus, known as the Mantle Tower. Through detailed analysis of the wall, crenellations come to light. They reveal this tower had earlier stages. There are also putlog holes in the wall which could have facilitated a hoard. Alternatively, they were used for scaffolding during time of construction. To illustrate the tower with its crenellations, a previous version depicted it with a flat roof, a so-called fighting platform. However, on the actual ruins of the Mantle Tower, there seems to be no drainage for rainwater. A later version therefore depicts the tower with a roof, as well as a hoard. Either version of reconstruction may have been a real possibility. Ultimately, a choice has to be made when making reconstructions. And one should always ask, which time period is chosen for the reconstruction model? A decision was then made to make a model of Hammershus, spanning the years from 1325 to 1525. And yet another model that encompasses its next century of its heydays. Which means, not all the buildings seen on this model may necessarily have existed simultaneously. Due to historical uncertainties, it is impossible to make historically accurate models for each time period. Reconstructing anything, when all you have are ruins and scarce contemporary depictions, can be a difficult puzzle. And nowhere is that more evident than at the ruins of Hald Castle in central Jutland. Situated in a lake at the hills of Dollerup, Denmark, it was built by a local bishop a few years prior to the Protestant Reformation of 1536. What seemed to be a quick and simple attempt to illustrate the gatehouse proved a difficult task. Only a 17th century copperplate engraving exists of Hald Castle. However, it contains a very inaccurate depiction when considering the actual ruins and its unusual floor plan. As this 19th century photo reveals, Hald was once an earth-covered ruin. The gatehouse wasn't excavated until 1903. When it was unearthed, they found 2 vaulted cellars, and during a restoration in the 1980s, archaeologists also found 2 pits for drawbridge counterweights. A first attempt to reconstruct the gatehouse was made in 2017. The 2 vaulted cellars, or casemates, were then depicted as earth-covered, though this building is, in fact, the main building. In contemporary written sources, it is called the Large Stone House. It wouldn't have been known as such if it was that small. So was the gatehouse wider, after all? On the ruins, there are 2 niches, one for each casemate. They cannot be explained as gun ports. However, it has been suggested they were cesspits. If true, the latrines must have led to an upper floor, which means it would make no sense if the cellars were covered by earth. A decision was then made to draw inspiration from another contemporary 16th century, then Danish, Månstorp Castle. Located in Scania, it is now part of modern-day Sweden. Månstorp's curved gable is similar to the near semicircular shape of the ruins of Hald Castle. This is another attempt to reconstruct the gatehouse. There are 2 pits for the drawbridge counterweights. Above the pits are both a narrow entrance for pedestrians called a wicket gate and a wider entrance for wagons. The idea behind it is that if there are enemies around, the large drawbridge is rarely lowered, and the small drawbridge can be raised faster than the large drawbridge. Every castle is unique and has to fit to the regional, cultural, and natural environment. Even though some features are common across many cultures, the choice of materials is often reflected in the architecture. And many North German, Baltic, and Danish castles are made of red bricks. Unfortunately, several castles in this region are now in ruins, making it difficult when deciding on how to reconstruct them. This is Malbork Castle in Poland. During the 18th and 19th century, it underwent several changes, and yet another restoration after the Second World War, though it largely maintained its original appearance. We know this because 15th and 16th century paintings of the original Malbork Castle actually do exist. Malbork is a castle of the Teutonic Order of Knights, a prominent power in the Baltic region. Another major power in this region is Denmark. It is therefore likely that Danish and Teutonic castles share the same architectural features, possibly through trade, travel, and warfare, allowing for an exchange of culture. If that is indeed the case, it may be worth studying other Baltic castles, and then applying some Teutonic features on reconstruction models of Danish castles. Though this hypothesis is not set in stone, future investigations in both art, literature, and archaeology may provide alternative insights on how to reconstruct architecture of the Middle Ages.